Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Q&A. I'm Jennifer.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Paul.
And we're going to answer your questions that come into the Q&A@gmail.com email address. This week from NetScope, hello fellow geeks, I watched your videos for about 1 year and I learned a lot from them, so keep up the good work. My question is, I recently bought a new 4K monitor. I already have an nvidia 780 Ti, but a friend of mine advised me to buy another one. So what do you guys think about that? Would it increase performance? By the way, I work a lot with video and 3D animation. Best regards, NetScope. You stumped them.
Short answer would be yes. Another 780 Ti will improve your performance. You're still going to run into the memory frame buffer issue that might occur at 4K depending on what games you're playing. So I would say run GPU-Z, go into the little settings or where you can see all the little things of how much is being used of everything. Check your memory, see if it's going past 3 gigs, because if it's going past 3 gigs, the only way to really combat that is to turn down the eye candy or to get a graphics card with a higher frame buffer. So like a 290X or a GTX Titan, which I know is much more expensive. Another 780 Ti will help out your performance, your frame rate, and that sort of thing. I haven't done as many direct comparisons, so it's hard to say exactly how much bang for your buck you'll get for that. But then the other side of that being, if you do 3D rendering applications or that type of thing, typically those are not built or programmed to take use of SLI configurations. So you probably won't get benefit from that, although you should check with whatever software you use to see if maybe you do, because some of them have advanced to the point where they can get assistance from multiple graphics cards.
And more importantly, if you can afford a second 780 Ti, you should send one to us.
Yes.
Because we can't.
Next question. What does it mean if a graphics card has a 384-bit memory bus? How does it affect the graphics card? Thanks, you guys are my favorites. Aaron T. Aaron T, you're our favorite too.
Yes. Thanks, Aaron. Memory, so whether you're talking about a motherboard with a processor or a graphics card, memory has to be controlled somehow. That has a memory controller. With graphics cards and the way that they're organized, you can actually have multiple memory controllers. So the bit rate of your bus is basically informing you how many, I kind of look at them as like channels, but how many different lanes of communication you have between the memory itself and the GPU. So a wider memory bus, like 384-bit or 512-bit as opposed to like 128 or 256, means you have more bandwidth there. And typically that's going to show the most performance improvement if you're looking at stuff like turning up anti-aliasing in games or anisotropic filtering, or all of those little post-processing things like eye candy, shadows, textures that they throw into a rendered 3D frame after the fact. That's typically where additional memory bandwidth like that will give you more performance. And it is a spec that I often look at when I'm thinking about graphics cards, because it is something that can have a pretty significant effect, especially for playing high-end AAA titles.
That's especially true if you can afford, like, well, and I do this when I'm shopping for graphics cards too. The last graphics card I bought was a 660 Ti, and basically what I looked at was I couldn't afford the next rung up. I couldn't afford the what is the next one?
670?
It's like,
760?
Oh, there's this.
Or 670. Oh, you mean the next generation?
Yeah, like the next generation.
Gotcha, yeah.
So this was the newest generation I could afford, and I couldn't quite afford the 700 series generation. So from there, I looked at how much more would it be to get the higher bus width, so that at least you're getting the most bang for your buck. And usually the price difference there, I found, is between like $20 and $30 more each bus width upgrade. So from a 128-bit, you're looking at like $30 to $40 more for the 256, and then from there like $30 or $40 more for the next one up, depending on what that manufacturer has allowed for the bus width on that graphics card. So it is an important thing to look at when you're considering purchasing one, and certainly can get a lot more bang for your buck out of like an older or lower generation card if you get the higher bus width. But I was going to ask, in addition to that, so if you have a, like in that situation, you know, you have like a little bit of a budget limitation, is it better to get a, say, an older generation card with a higher bus width than a newer generation card with a lower bus width? or would you still get a better performance out of the newer generation card regardless?
That is hard to answer. Like, just generally speaking, it'd be more of a case-by-case basis, because going from one generation to the next, sometimes you have a completely new architecture, like say NVIDIA is now moving from Kepler architecture to Maxwell architecture, and that can have a pretty big difference sometimes, whereas for something like the GTX 600 series to the GTX 700 series, still both use Kepler architecture, so it was more of like a refinement than it was a completely new type of architecture that they're putting in the GPU. So it's case by case, but for something like that, I would check the benchmark comparison websites that are out there and kind of get it. That's always best to do. Look at the games you're going to play, look at benchmarks for those games and how they perform with the card that you're looking at, and that's the best way to get a more personalized scenario of what kind of performance you can expect from whatever card you're thinking about investing in.
Great. Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome.
This one comes from Josh, and he wants to know, I was wondering why Kyle doesn't do product overviews even though he's on your regular content. It's because he doesn't know anything.
It's because they're a waste of my time. They're beneath me.
Yep.
It's because he doesn't know anything. I'm kidding. Actually, if you want to see Kyle do some awesome product overviews, you need to check out his personal channel, Awesome Sauce News. He has a lot of really, really inventive product overviews because he doesn't get to do product overviews at work. He takes all of that information that he knows home and makes really awesome overview videos there.
Yeah, I guess
marshmallows.
I guess another reason why is because I do a lot of back-end stuff. I help our manager, Mr. Lamb, with a lot of
the back-end stuff.
A lot of the back-end stuff, if you know what I mean. And so because of that, I don't always have the time to research products and shoot unboxing videos. I do have time to occasionally hop on Yolk'd and things like that, because it's just we have Rachel, a writer who writes awesome scripts for it, and she just hands it to me, and it's easy to just kind of go press record and get it done. Yeah, that's pretty much the most part. I'm not a beast. I'm not in beast mode like Paul, who can actually do unboxing videos at work and at home as well on his channel.
Yeah, that's true. No, there's only one Paul.
But
I was going to say, what was the last hardware video you did on your personal channel? It was for your own PC build. You were updating it or something like that. What did you do? Yeah,
I made some revisions to my personal desktop at home that I've had. It was the first system that Paul actually helped me throw together. Well, he taught me how to build a PC here, and then I bought all the parts, took it home, and built it. So it's really a sentimental system to me because it's my first one. But it was just getting dated, and I didn't really make any major changes to it. Same CPU, still 2600K, and same motherboard and things like that. But I did add a nice white LED that Paul and I found in Taiwan when we were shopping around there, and I hooked it up to my fan controller, so I installed a new fan controller, hooked up the LED to it so I can adjust the brightness on it. I cleaned the whole thing out. I moved all the hard drives and SSDs that were in the 5¼ inch bays to the, I brought back the drive cages that originally came with the 600T case that everything's in. So I put those all in there. I redid all of the cable management. I mean, the whole process just for cable management alone probably took like 2.5 hours.
Yeah, that was a long time coming.
Yes, it was.
That cable management.
Yes, it was. Ever since day one. I think the first video I uploaded on my channel, my personal channel, was showing off my rig, and I showed all the cable management. I was like, I promise you guys, I'm gonna fix it. And like literally like a year and a half to 2 years later, I finally did it. So it was a nice video. I'm glad it got done. Yeah, so if you want to see Kyle's unique perspective on products and hardware, definitely check out his channel. That's Awesome Sauce News on YouTube. Thanks, Jenny.
Lots of swearing though.
What?
Yeah, it's inappropriate, not safe for work. Just saying.
Nudity too.
Probably. That's true.
All right, I have some questions. Good, we have some answers. I have a gaming rig, and I was thinking about having a server to have all my games on it, such as Minecraft. What components should I look for, such as motherboard, memory, etc.? Also, can I build a small server that can go on my desk, so something like a micro ATX or mini ITX build? And that's from, I'm sorry, that's from Jaw Dodge.
What's up, Jaw Dodge?
Yo, yo.
So yes, you can build a server. You can build a server out of almost anything. You can take almost any old system, as long as you got the basics, motherboard, processor, memory, and storage, and you can make a server out of it with an operating system. Really, it depends on use case and what you want to use that server for. So a home server, you can take old, outdated hardware that's 2, 3, 4, 5 years old and set up something to be a functional server. What you're talking about is actually loading games directly off of that server, and there's where you're going to run into a little bit of potential bandwidth issues, because most home networks are going to be gigabit based if you're talking wired stuff, and that's 1,000 megabytes per second. If you look at the fastest mainstream actual internal storage option right now, you're looking at Serial ATA revision 3, which is 6 gigabits per second. So that's 6 times the amount of bandwidth that you get there. And you also have native connections. So if you have an SSD connected directly to your chipset with 6 gigabit per second connection, then you're going to be seeing those games load off of that SSD, or even a hard drive for that matter, much, much faster than they would over your network, because you have network protocols to deal with and just that limitation of bandwidth. Now, if you have the chops to invest in, say, a 10 gigabit network in your home, which is very expensive, by the way, and probably impractical just for use for loading games off of, then you could potentially get much more real-time types of game loading and stuff like that. So I would recommend, if it's really just because you want to load games faster, just invest in an SSD or something, an additional drive, drop it in your system, install the games onto that, and don't worry about the whole networking thing. If you're looking for something a bit more advanced, like I want a server set up at home so that the 3 desktops and tablet or whatever that I have connected, it backs them up so that I have some data security, or you want to set up a 4 or 5 drive RAID configuration in there so that you have some redundancy with the storage in case the drive fails, something like that. That to me is a much more viable reason to get a server. Of course, you can still load games onto the server and load them up over the network. That's not a huge problem. It's just if you're loading, especially like Battlefield or something like that, something that has big maps with lots of textures, it's going to take longer, significantly longer, especially as compared to like a locally connected SSD. But yeah, as far as what hardware to use, it's hard for me to say because without knowing more specifically what you're going to be using that for. But just bear in mind, you can repurpose a lot of old computer parts, and a lot of people will do that. They'll build a new gaming workstation, and you take your old system, set it up and configure it for a server. To my mind, though, one of the biggest things I look at when I'm talking about a server is power consumption, because if it's going to be on 24/7, I don't want to take like an i7-920, which was an extremely powerful processor 4 or 5 years ago, and set it up as a server, because the power draw on that is going to be pretty significant. So I would look at something potentially newer, lower power, something maybe Atom-based or like an i3, something with low TDP for a server, just to make sure that you're not really running up your power bill from having that on all the time.
So I guess the short practical answer is if game loading is what you're interested in and having enough available storage to keep all of your games, probably just upping the storage capacity of your personal rig is the most realistic, since, like you said, most people don't have 10 gigabit in their home.
Yeah, I don't have
And also,
that.
if you're like a renter, you don't want to spend the money to have that upgrade done on somebody else's property.
That's true.
So.
Yeah.
Well, all right, so here, entertain this hypothetical scenario.
Okay.
So let's say the person who's asking this question has to do it this way. He has to run it over like a single gigabit network or whatever, and he's against SSDs. Like an SSD killed his mom like 10 years ago, and he'll never touch them again.
My condolences.
So would running a game off of a network or a server like Minecraft theoretically be easier to run than, let's say, a AAA title with lots of textures like Battlefield 4, or are they pretty much the same on that playing field?
Yes, something that like a simpler game with not as much data to load over the network is going to be much easier to load. So yeah, something like Minecraft, it's not going to take as long, because you're basically talking about those bits of data that are residing on the server and need to go over the network and then load up into your local system memory on your computer. And then if there's stuff that's not there, every time it needs to pull it across that interface. If you are talking about a much simpler game that has much less game data to load, then yeah, it's going to be faster than something like, I always use the Battlefield example, but Battlefield or even something like Grand Theft Auto 5 when it comes out. You know, huge maps on there, tons of textures, and that's the type of thing where really the limitation you're going to hit is when you go to load game, you're going to have to sit there and wait longer on that loading screen for the game to actually start. Once the game starts up and is running, it'll run just the same as it was if you had the data stored locally, unless it needs interim loading time as well. But yeah.
Fair enough. There you go.
Okay. Excellent.
Sorry about your mom.
All right, well, I think that wraps up this episode of Q&A. Thanks, guys, for joining me this week.
Sure.
And you can have all your questions answered at qnegg@gmail.com or tweet to us at qnegg on Twitter. Anyway, until next time, I'm Jennifer, and thank you for watching Newegg TV.